Real estate is an amazing investment vehicle. It features tax advantages and allows you to use leverage, and you don't have to be rich to get started. But there's not just one or two ways to invest in real estate, there's actually a ton. The real trick is figuring out which one is right for you. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the different types of real estate investment and help you figure out whether being more active or passive in your real estate investments is right for you. I'm Jennifer Rulins, broker of One Focus Property Management and landlord educator and advocate. The best thing I can do for the investors that I help every day is help them learn more about real estate investment and whether active or passive real estate investing is right for them. After all, we want to make money, not make ourselves crazy. Let's get started. Let's start by reviewing this diagram. As you'll see, we have a spectrum of real estate investments here with active on the left and passive on the right. And there's a line down the middle that identifies on the left side or active side of the spectrum. That's when the investor is really referred to as the landlord, and they serve the role of landlord. And on the right-hand side of this diagram, you'll see that they're not landlords. This is the passive side. So let's start with the most active type of investment, and that is the directly owned and managed real estate by the investor. So this is when you, the investor, decide to go purchase a property, and you purchase it, you manage it, you do everything yourself. So if it needs to be fixed, you're fixing it up. If it needs to be leased, you lease it. This is the most active form of real estate investment you can get. It doesn't just have to be residential. Of course, people do this with short-term rentals. They do it with land. They do it with commercial properties. So a lot of different ways you can directly own and manage this property. But this is what in the industry we call mom and pop landlords. So these are people who are doing it themselves, often without a ton of education or skills or resources. They're just kind of fumbling along and treating it like a side business. This is incredibly active, and this is not always what people think they're getting into when they buy a real estate asset. Well, let's move on to the next type of real estate investment, which is your managed properties or turnkey properties. And so we're still on that left side of the spectrum. We're still a landlord in this situation because you directly own the real estate. You own it either personally or in your LLC, but you're getting a little less active because you're starting to insert some professional services in there. So if you're using a property management company like One Focus, you're really at that spot in the spectrum where you directly own it, but you're not managing it yourself. Same could be true of using turnkey properties. So turnkey property providers are people who prepare properties, do the renovations, and often sometimes will even lease them and then sell them off to investors. And so turnkey means you're not having to do as much work to stabilize the asset once you buy it. And you know, when you take advantage of these services like turnkey inventory or like professional property managers, you certainly do pay a little bit of money. You leave some money on the table, but you are saving yourself a ton of work. So it's really a holistic decision about your energy, resources, and skills and what you're prepared to do toward this investment. Because you can have all the good intentions in the world, but if you're not able to fulfill on them, the person you're shortchanging is really yourself, because you own this property and have that responsibility and hope to have the gain. As we move right on the spectrum, you can see we crossed that line where we're no longer a landlord. We're on the passive side of the spectrum. But the most active side of the passive side is syndications and investing in syndications. So these aren't commonly known and they're not easily found all the time. These are often known through private networks. And what they are groups of investors who get together, pool their money, and will buy larger projects. So maybe a larger multifamily property, a larger commercial property, or a commercial group of buildings. Sometimes they'll get together to buy out a portfolio, like a larger single landlord who's selling a large portfolio all at once. It allows investors to get access to larger deals that they wouldn't have access to on their own, and also some economies of scale, because when you have a larger portfolio of property, you can spread some of those costs of managing it out over the larger portfolio, making it more profitable to own a larger group of properties. Now, the work is a little bit different in this because you are assessing the syndicator, the person putting together the deal, you're assessing the deal, and then of course you're reviewing your statements and you're kind of keeping people honest. You're asking questions over the course of the investment. You're not normally, as an investor in a syndication, counted on for your expertise, and you don't have the ability to make all the shots or make all the calls. But as an investor in a syndication, you are heard and you do have a responsibility to decide for yourself whether you're going to get in on that deal because it is for a project or a set of properties. It's not an ongoing fund that does things in perpetuity. Typically, syndications are based around a holding period with a pre-prescribed exit date at the start. So the main role in syndications is underwriting the deal and the people that you would be working with. As we move to the right on this spectrum, you see we come up with online crowd-funded syndications. So there's a lot of these now, and blockchain's made this possible, and so has some internet capabilities. And so what this does is take the syndication and open it up to a larger pool of investors, often with smaller stakes in the game. So instead of contributing large sums of money, 25, 50, 100,000 and up, these are people getting into the syndication for often as little as $1,000. Now, you are having to identify which syndication you're working with, and these are all different. So some of them you're just kind of buying into a fund, kind of like a REIT, which is what we'll talk about next. Others are offering you pieces and deals that you do get to analyze and sort of underwrite for yourself. So it's less active than the syndications. You have less of a role to play, and you certainly would not have a role on an ongoing basis as an investor, in that you really are just a silent investor who is owed their returns at the prescribed schedule. But you do have some choice, you do have some ability to control where your investment goes, so it still remains a bit active in that way. The most passive real estate investment we're going to chat about today is on the far right end of the spectrum, and that's your REITs. So that's how that word is said, REIT, but it's really an acronym for Real Estate Investment Trust. And what that means is it's essentially a mutual fund for real estate. So the REIT, the company, will assemble a portfolio of properties and sell shares in that property group. So maybe it's large metropolitan area skyscrapers, and they own a skyscraper. This REIT owns a skyscraper in New York City, Chicago, LA, Dallas, and Miami. And so all of those assets are owned in the REIT, and there could be thousands of investors in that REIT, and they've bought shares. Now, the only decision you get to make in a REIT is whether you buy, hold, or sell. That is it. The REIT is going to be operating that business on an ongoing basis for the benefit of the shareholders. Now, real estate investment trusts are incredibly interesting because they have two features that make them unusual. So one is they're a high yield investment because the government actually requires that they distribute at least 90% of their taxable income to the shareholders each year. So these REITs can't be building up a bunch of cash and sitting on it like some other companies, Apple, but they have to distribute it back to the shareholders. So it's high yield. The other great aspect of REITs is it avoids this double taxation trap. So if you own a share of stock in a company, that company pays taxes and then you pay taxes on your dividend. Well, that's not true with a REIT. It passes through, so to speak. So that income is not taxed at the corporate level, at the REIT level. Instead, the only time that income on the REIT is taxed is when it hits the shareholder in that dividend. So again, you don't get a lot of control or access to decisions in a REIT, but you do get access to the kind of inventory that would be very difficult to own on your own because it's very expensive and often isn't local to you. But REITs are a really interesting option. They're very passive, but they have some really great features. Let's work through some of the pros and cons of active versus passive real estate investing. When you're an active investor, one of the biggest pros is that you have a lot of control. So if you believe that you have special knowledge or resources, experience, time, if you have those sorts of things, having control over the asset might make a lot of sense. I do see a lot of people saying, well, I want to have a lot of control because I want to learn. It's really hard to tell people this, but if you want to learn, you need to go get educated. And sometimes that means getting a job in the business or taking some courses. Just watch out how much you're learning on your own investment money, because that money was hard-earned by you. It deserves to be working and not be lost. Let's make sure we're preserving it as much as possible. So we love having that control. And one of the other big benefits to active investing is taxes. So there's some really interesting ways that when properties directly owned, that taxes can be manipulated to control your obligation. When you are managing it and own it directly, you have the control over those tax rules and how they're applied to your situation. So that's a big plus when it comes to active investing. Some of the cons of active real estate investing. Well, really the experience is so needed. I kind of made a comment earlier about take a course, but truthfully, there just aren't really good ways to learn about real estate investment without doing it or working with a mentor. And so not having that experience would put you at a real disadvantage when it comes to actively managing your own portfolio. The other big con is time. It's deceiving how much time your real estate investments will take up. When you're new to this business, it's easy to kind of underestimate how much time it's going to take, but it really does take quite a bit of time. And so if you have your time committed to perhaps other income producing activity or to your family or to hobbies, know that you are going to have to make some changes if you plan on actively owning and managing your own properties. So let's chat about the pros about passive real estate investing. Well, here's where those cons on active really come into play. You don't need to have a lot of experience. Most of the work on those types of investments is done up front, and the experience is needed by the professionals running the funds. So you don't need to have that experience. That is a tremendous value in passive real estate investing. And the same thing with time. You don't need a lot of time to be a passive real estate investor. This requires you, depending on where you fall on that passive end of the spectrum, doing, a couple of hours of research, up to maybe a day or two. But then once you've done that, often your contribution's over. Your investment is made, and you're really just keeping up with it, reviewing your statements and asking questions when needed. So you don't need a lot of time to be a passive real estate investor, and that's great. The cons of passive real estate investing. The first one I'll mention is the lack of control. So you don't have control over the decisions that are being made, how they're being made, and what information is being used to make them. And that can be a bit frustrating. If you like to be more active in your investments and you feel like you have something to contribute, that could be a frustrating component and maybe a reason that you're not right for passive real estate investing. The other would be the lack of liquidity. Because you don't have control over how those investments are run, it's not always possible to get your investment back on your timetable. Now, sometimes these different funds have ways to get your investments back, but they almost always come at a penalty if you're not in for the full expected term. So not being able to get your investment back when you want could be a challenge that means passive real estate investing isn't for you. So what is right for you? Well, in general, if you're inexperienced in real estate, I advise that you start to learn about it and get your experience in investing on that passive end of the spectrum. It's a bit safer, it's a bit less risky than maybe getting into it yourself, especially with the lack of experience and resources. So get your feet under you. And I love passive real estate investing. It's not as sexy, and they certainly don't make TV shows about it on HGTV, but it is a very valid way to have your money working for you in the real estate industry. It just has the extra benefit of not having to get dirty, have calls from tenants, or do any of the work. Now, I will say active real estate investing is a lot of fun. I've built a whole business around it and helping investors with this. So I understand why people want to be active real estate investors, why they see that appeal, and why they like that control and all of those advantages being at their fingertips. So I understand and I get it. My advice to anybody who's inexperienced getting into the active side of real estate investment is try to shoot for that second marker, the one second from the left we talked about, where you're either using a professional manager, you're using a turnkey inventory supplier, you're using ways to make this a more passive investment. I hope you enjoyed this video. I love making videos for you, and I do hope if you're an active real estate investor looking to get a bit more passive, that you'll call One Focus Property Management. This is all we do. We help move landlords and turn them into investors by making their active investment more passive for them. And of course, it performs far better with our expert management. So I hope you'll give us a like, give us a follow, and tune in again next week. And enjoy the video we bring you then. Have a great one.